The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, here with Sam. Sam, the Suns are bad again. How you doing?
I'm all right. There's nothing I love more than sitting down to record my weekly episode to talk about my beloved Phoenix Suns, who lost by only a combined 84 points over 3 games the past week.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been the best result. I think there's a bunch of stuff we could get into. The big thing I think on everyone's mind is this KD injury now. He appears to have sprained his ankle last night against the Houston Rockets. So that is going to loom over the rest of the season and honestly, the summer as well. So I think that's the big thing to talk about. But yeah, I'm doing all right. If you're listening still at this point in the season, congratulations. We appreciate your support, but also you're a sicko, and yes, we will.
And we'll be making trades.
And we will be making trades in the second half of the episode, as is our contractual duty at this point.
Every podcast is an off-season podcast for us.
We're actually sponsored by Spotrac. That's our new, that's how we're making our money these days.
KD could have played his last game for the Suns. I think there's a chance of that. Now, I'm not saying he's definitely going to be out for that long, but that was not a good-looking ankle roll there. There are times when a player rolls his ankle and it looks like, okay, then they could be back even in the second half. I think that happened, in fact, with, who was it, Jalen Green? No, it was Thompson that rolled his ankle in the game and then played later in the game. But for KD, that thing did not look good. And there's a chance that he'll be out for the rest of the season. And we'll see. We haven't got any update on that other than he's not traveling on their current road trip. And they're going to give him an MRI to see what the extent of the injury is. But all indications is that he's going to be traded in the offseason. And that's all reporting has said that. So I think there's a chance that no more KD on the Suns. And we'll see. I think there's a, the win streak that they had. It had us all talking about the play-in, and now it's really difficult to even bring that up. The Suns still have the most difficult schedule of all the teams that are vying for a play-in spot. They're currently out of it, they're in the 11th seed, and KD will be out at least for a short period of time, if not the rest of the season. I mean, those dreams are dead, right?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say
talk about that.
Well, I wouldn't say they're dead.
They're not entirely in the Suns' hands, which is interesting.
Yeah, I just don't think anyone should have that expectation anymore of that. I mean, certainly if you want the players to be fighting for the play-in, but the next 8 games, is it 8 games, something like that, aren't about that. If you're watching as a fan, it's kind of I'm watching to see Ryan Dunn now play. If KD's out, Ryan Dunn, you get to play 38 minutes. Congratulations, right? And Oso is going to be, on the court every game. And, I think the nice thing...
should start, is what I think.
The nice thing about that, I agree with you. The nice thing about that, obviously, is, we've kind of been asking to see those guys in a while and for a while. And we get to sort of try and chart their development to the best of our ability. But... also they're going to be going up against contenders almost every game, with the exception of those last couple games against San Antonio and Sacramento. And maybe they can pull off a couple wins. That would be great, but they're probably going to look pretty bad the vast majority of the time. So it should not be anyone's expectation. It could happen, though. There is still, I feel, enough talent on this roster. And the Mavs and the Kings both are enough of just kind of question marks all the time. That, the play-in could definitely happen. It's just not my main focus anymore.
It's definitely not mine either. And I talked about it on the last episode. Just from a general perspective, their 4-game win streak, I thought, I can't let this team trick me, because there was last season, we talked about it, the last 10 games are against all playoff teams. They went 7-3. In their 3 losses, they got demolished. In their 7 wins, the teams were missing a lot of the star players that made them good, which happens a lot at the end of the season, by the way. It's not just good teams that have players resting. It's also bad teams that are just resting guys to try to tank.
Yeah.
So like there's this combination of the last month and a half of the season can trick you. Like it can play tricks on you.
Mickey
In
Mouse
this case-
March is what
Yeah.
we've been saying throughout all of March. Yesterday on Playback, we coined the term. We were like, okay, we're calling it Mickey Mouse March. What is it in April? And I think we decided Alec Peters April is what
Yeah.
it's going to be. Because
Exactly, yeah.
we were trying to figure out some alliteration. And I just always remember that one Alec Peters game, the last game of the season, where he had 30 whatever points.
Yeah,
It's-
30. Yeah, I think we need to get Ryan Dent a 30-point game. Like we just got to get that going for the end of the season. There's no reason to not do that in Alec Peters April. But yeah, so like I part of me was still like I'm not even going to put my faith in them getting that play-in spot anyway. The one caveat to that being that the Sacramento Kings look terrible, and there's a chance that they just continue to lose throughout the rest of the season. But going forward, without Kevin Durant, who's been a factor in the wins for this team, without him, it's tough to even believe that they'll be great. And stack on top of that, Devin Booker probably having one of his worst games of the season, if not the worst game of the season, against the Wolves.
Against Minnesota,
doesn't give
he
you.
was absolutely atrocious. Yeah.
He looked 100 years old. Like, he just looked. I described it on our Patreon as it reminded me of how Chris Paul looked after he hurt his shoulder in the playoffs and continued to play. Like, he did not look good. He came back, of course, against Houston and was kind of the only player who played well, made like 8 of his first 9 shots, and then didn't matter, of course, because the rest of the team was awful and they played zero defense. The Houston Rockets, do you want to know where they are on the season offensively? I looked it up because they put 150 points on the Suns, basically.
I want to say they're a better defensive team than they are offensive. So
They
top
are
15, but not like top 10.
I thought they would have been lower, and you're right. It's 11th
Okay.
in offense, but they let the 11th offensive team in the NBA score a million.
I mean,
points on them.
I guess they could be lower, but you don't win close to 50 games as like the
Yeah.
20th best offense in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's an interesting season too, where the best defenses outside of the Orlando Magic all have pretty good offenses.
You know what's funny?
They're just good teams across the entire thing, except for the Miami Heat and Orlando Magic.
I was looking at Reddit.
Those Florida teams, Mickey Mouse Florida teams.
I was looking at Reddit last night after the Rockets lost and the RNBA, and of course I shouldn't do this to myself, right? It's just like you shouldn't do this, but I did because I'm an idiot. And there was the thread about KD's injury, and in it, Rockets fans were talking about. I think some Rockets fans were bringing up like, oh, we don't even want KD. Book is the guy, and then other Rockets fans were responding to that, being like, the way Jalen Green played last night, Jalen Green outplayed Devin Booker. We don't even want Booker anymore, and that's the sort of thing that I'm just like, shut the fuck up. Like Jalen Green has had one good month in 4 years. And
it's a great example of how fans watch the season, right? They only watch when teams play.
Yeah, and also just
certain
the
games,
duality of narratives. I mean, it's reminiscent of Suns fans too, in a way that after the 4-game win streak, I was not saying this, but there were certainly plenty of people saying, hey, not only are we back, but let's run it back with Book and KD next year and we'll be fine. And I just they've struggled so much against any like semblance of good teams this year that to never really give me that faith that just running it back with KD and Book and different role players who would have to be acquired on more veteran minimums, that would be like a feasible solution for this team long term. I do just want to talk quickly about more on KD. So I think it's a little unfortunate we don't know what's going to happen with him in these last few games. If he does get shut down, though, he's at 62 games currently.
Yeah.
And that's an angle we talked about on the playback yesterday, too, as the injury happened, is, of course, there's this minimum requirement of 65 games now in order to qualify for end-of-season awards, and that includes...
Dumb rule, I still think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I've softened on that over time. When it first came out, I was like, yeah, what's the problem? You probably should play 65 games. Now that it's been a couple seasons, I think I realize 65 games actually is a lot. I'd be curious.
The 65-game rule also doesn't stop injuries. Like, sometimes these guys are just injured.
Right. Do you think...
The point is stopping them from sitting. I don't think it's really doing that anyway.
Okay, but do you think 65 games is too strict? Or do you think, would it be better if it was...
None of it's necessary.
Okay, so you think there should be no limit?
I don't think that we are giving awards to players who play less than 65 games already. Like, it never really was a problem.
I'd have to look.
It's just sort of a vague. I like the idea of fining teams when they rest guys who aren't injured. You know, like they did with the Utah Jazz twice this season. The one team resting players and getting fined.
Yeah, it's
is
easy to
the
do
worst
it.
team in the NBA.
Easy to do it when
Utah
it's
Jazz.
the Utah Jazz. I'd like to see you do it to other teams, but that's fine.
Yeah, maybe the Sixers may have been fined once too, but anyway, regardless of all of that, I just don't think it's a problem. Like, it's not a problem that they're solving. It's if I understand trying to figure out ways to make sure when players are healthy that they play. I don't necessarily think that's the case in this specific thing.
In any case, KD,
if anything, right, it gives a team like OKC a specific number to hit if they want to rest SGA. Mm-hmm. They're like, okay, he's played 65 games. Now we can rest him the final 7 games of the season.
I mean,
or whatever, he's already met that limit,
the league would still crack down on that if they did that, I think. Anyway, with KD, he is going to finish, or he might finish 3 games off of this elusive requirement, right? Which, look, his resume speaks for itself. His legacy, if you want to use the word, speaks for itself, right? Does he really need, you could make the case, a 12th All-NBA appearance? Because this would be his...
Or does he deserve it?
His 12th All-NBA appearance? Well, that's an interesting question. I think he could get in if he hits 65 games as a third-team guy. Now, interestingly, KD in his entire career, I suppose this makes sense, but he has 11 All-NBA appearances, all first and second team. Has never been in the third team, which of course, like, theoretically means you're between the 11th and 15th best players in the NBA that season. He's never been on that team. And, maybe just, I think that's probably where he would land if he did qualify, and maybe evidence of course, the fact that he is still very good, but is also slowing down just a little bit. Do you want to know how many players in NBA history, I just pulled this up too, have at least 12 All-NBA appearances in their career?
I'm guessing it's like less than 20.
It is definitely less than 20. It's 12 players.
Okay.
Which is more than I thought. Like, I thought KD getting his 12th appearance would put him in kind of like, I don't know, maybe not a Mount Rushmore, but like I thought he would be closer to the top of the top on that list.
Yeah.
But,
right.
As I look at it, like, there's guys, Jerry West is here.
There's just fewer teams back then.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Bob Cousy is here. Dolph Schayes made 12 All-NBA teams. I'm thinking that's a little bit unnecessary. No disrespect to Dolph Schayes.
JJ Redick would say those are all fireman and plumber teams.
But a little bit of disrespect to Dolph Schayes. Yeah, exactly. KD currently tied with notable greats such as Charles Barkley, Chris Paul, Michael Jordan, who only has 11 All-NBA teams, so he passes Michael Jordan if he could just get one more, and that's sort of what's at stake here. If his health is at all at question, or at all in question, then just shut him down. But if he can come back, I have a feeling he probably wants to get to 65 games and kind of.
And
has
fair
that on
for
his
him
mind.
to try to do that, but like as far as the Suns go, by that time, if there's 3 games left in the season, he's trying to come back. It's probably not because the Suns are in the running for the play-in, but maybe they will be. I don't know. Like, it's really difficult to predict because, this is not really the top of the standings here that we're talking about where teams are pretty consistent and you can count on certain things happening. But it's the bottom of the standings here where the Kings could just completely fall out of it. The Mavs could have more injuries, not to say that they will, but it's stuff like that can happen and they can completely fall out of it, and you just never know where the Suns are going to be at the end of that. Or the Suns do something miraculous and win some games without Kevin Durant. Or maybe like they fire Coach Mike Budenholzer and they get that dead cat bounce and they win a couple games after firing their coach, which tends to happen. Although I don't know if it's happening with the Memphis Grizzlies right now.
Don't think it's going to happen. I think Bud might.
Can I ask that too? Like, let's have a quick conversation on that.
On Bud? Sure.
What are the chances of him being fired now? And then even let's talk about at the end of the season.
At the end of the season, I think it's quite high. Right now, I think it's quite low. I think the Taylor Jenkins thing that we just saw, we talked about a little bit on our Patreon pod, but for anyone who didn't listen to that, the Grizzlies fired Taylor Jenkins this week. That was unprecedented for a team in their position, and I understand they're maybe not performing as well as they should be to the likes of their front office against other good teams, and they've been sliding in the standings, and I understand all that. But still, you look at that roster, You look at the number of, as I call them, nobodies on that roster, guys who were not, high caliber free agent signings, not even guys that they traded for, but guys they've selected in the late first round, in the second round, guys they found off the street who were literally undrafted that then Taylor Jenkins and his staff turned into decent role players. I would make the case that team is still exceeding expectations for the amount of talent that they have on their roster. And so that really was something you never see. And I don't, who knows? I'll have to admit I'm wrong if it happens, but I just don't see the Suns firing Mike Budenholzer in the next 8 games. I don't know why they do that.
I do think there's a massive difference between the Suns firing Mike Budenholzer as the 11th seed with going all in, and the Grizzlies firing their coach as the 5th seed.
Yeah, no one would come to Bud's. No one would come to Bud's defense if they did it. I just still don't think they'll do it.
After the season, though, do you feel it's almost guaranteed he will be fired?
I don't think it's guaranteed, no.
I don't either. And I don't know why that is. Like, I have no information on this or anything. I don't think, and I've said it this way before, I don't think there's a basketball case that Mike Budenholzer should keep his job at the end of the season. I don't think you could watch the games, watch the players, watch how unprepared they are, watch how terrible their defense is, watch their low effort, and think that this coach should remain. Now, the problem with that is that's been the case over 3 coaches with similar players on this team, over the course of this team. So it's difficult to say that a coach maybe doesn't deserve a chance with a different player group and seeing if that actually helps it.
There's a big difference.
I don't know that Mike Budenholzer is the guy that's earned
There's
that.
Still a big difference between this 36-win team or whatever they're going to be and Vogel's 49-win team. And of course, that team was worse than we wanted them to be, but they were connected on defense in a way that this team under Bud just never has been. And I 100% agree with you. There's no basketball case for Budenholzer to stay. The only case for Budenholzer to stay is that, you give lip service to this idea of culture and we want consistency. And beyond that, it's a shame-based thing, right? Because it's basically sunk cost fallacy is the only reason you'd keep him. Is Matt Ishbia saying, look, I've fired 3 coaches. I can't, or I fired 2 coaches. I can't do it again. We need to give him 1 more year. That's not a basketball case. That's an embarrassing case to have to make for why you would keep your head coach. But I could see them doing that. And that's why I say it's not a guarantee that he's going to be gone. There are going to be changes this summer. There are certainly going to be changes. But it's not a guarantee that Budenholzer is gone.
Okay, you set me up well for my next topic here, and I want to start it with talking about coaches, but I think we're at the point where I was just thinking about this while we were watching the game on playback, which, by the way, was brutal, especially after how much fun we had in our previous 3 wins on playback, but watching them lose, and I'm thinking, what should the Suns' goal be for next season? Because they have the opportunity to retool, to change, to make trades. They will. Reporting, I think this was Gambo that said basically nobody on the team is safe except for Devin Booker. Everyone will be on the trade block. Everyone will be available, which I think is probably the right way to approach this team. I don't think that it's good culture-wise, but when you have a culture this poor, maybe it is. Maybe it is good for culture just to flush this team down the toilet and figure out what you can do going forward. So what should the goal be next season is how I want to tackle this segment. But I want to start with talking about coaches that could be available next season. Now, we on our Patreon podcast, because we recorded it the day that Taylor Jenkins was fired, we had a conversation about Taylor Jenkins. And I think that Taylor Jenkins could be a candidate for the Suns, particularly if everyone is traded and the Suns are left with Devin Booker and a whole new team. I think there's a chance that you bring in Taylor Jenkins at that point and you give him the opportunity to see what he can do. But I have a list of other coaches, and shout out Steph Noah, who writes for The Sporting News, because I used his article talking about available coaches to find most of these names here. And I'm curious if any of these names stand out to you, and if you have any other thoughts on who could potentially be a future coach of this team. Now, the first one is a longtime assistant coach that has been interviewed for multiple NBA jobs and has not actually gotten that head coaching job, and his name is Chris Quinn. You've probably heard this name before when other coaching availabilities are open. And in those cases, he is interviewed but hasn't gotten the job. He is a longtime assistant with the Miami Heat.
With the Miami Heat, and I did know that. Did the Suns... The Suns never gave Quinn an interview during the Vogel process, did they? Yeah, I don't think they were really in the business of... I mean, this is with no disrespect to Chris Quinn, who, again, has done his time at the assistant...
Played in the NBA, too.
Played in the NBA a little bit and did his time at the assistant level, right? But, a lot of times when you're hiring a first-time head coach in their 40s, that's, very rebuilding team coded. And is just very much not what the Suns went with their last. They wanted to bring in championship coaches between Vogel and Budenholzer, and we saw how that's worked out for them. But that was very much their approach.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. Although I just wonder, it's tough for me because sometimes these guys end up being the best coaches in the NBA at some point. Younger guys who are available and they get that opportunity and they end up being really great. So finding that guy and having the intel and having the connections across the league in order to understand who could potentially be that future head coach is really important. And they need to have the right guy making that right decision going forward. And I think the Monty Williams hiring was really good and it worked really well for the team at the time. James Jones did that. And then everything beyond that, if you give credit to James Jones for Frank Vogel, honestly, it's been kind of a glow-up year for Frank Vogel, right? Am I wrong? You're looking at that Frank Vogel year a little differently now, right?
I mean, I didn't feel strongly that Vogel should have been fired at the time, but yeah, he probably feels pretty good. I hope he's had a good year. Probably like Bud was last year. I bet he's lost a lot of weight. I bet his blood pressure is great, and he's stress-free.
He's got a personal trainer.
He's got a personal trainer. He spent a lot of time with his family. Nothing but the best to Frank Vogel. I will say on Chris Quinn, the fact that he played in the NBA, even if it was he played 5 years and I'm looking at it here, 240 games in the NBA. Yeah. That was his career.
Mm-hmm. For the Heat, I believe, right?
Yeah. For the Heat, and then half a season with the Nets, half a season with the Spurs. But that matters. Mm-hmm. It does matter. And should it matter? I personally think no. But also, I'm not in a position to say, I guess, as someone who's not talented enough at basketball myself, to be in the shoes that the players are, right? I just, I guess if it makes it easier for them to sort of sympathize or empathize or just connect with.
Just relate.
Head coaches, just relate.
It's a brotherhood, right?
Exactly. Someone who's been there before in the capacity that they have. That is something that the Suns did not consider with Frank Vogel or Mike Budenholzer. And again, should it be a reason why they've tuned out their last two coaches, that those two coaches were not former NBA players? In my opinion, no. If you're a professional and you're being paid millions upon millions of dollars, you listen to your coach and you do your best to implement the system, and that's just how it is. But would it help? Yeah, it probably would. It probably would help to have a former player. And, how many... I've joked at various points throughout the season, how many midi Jimbos can Mike Budenholzer hit in a row, realistically? If you put Mike Budenholzer in a gym and asked him to snake a pick and roll and hit 10 elbow middies in a row, could he do it? Yeah. He probably can't do it. Chris Quinn could do it. I think
he's like when you're playing half-court games and there's an old man shooting free throws only on the other side of the court, for half an hour, and he sinks every free throw. I think that's what Bud does. If he gets to the gym,
I bet. Yeah, no, his free throw game probably elite. Yeah, for sure.
It's really solid, just sinking every free throw. Yeah, he's got a routine, right? He does it the same every time. Micah Nori, you may not recognize that name right away, but you will understand who he is if you look him up and see him. Because if you remember, during the playoffs, the head coach of the Timberwolves tore his ACL on the sidelines. Yes. And a coach stepped in to kind of lead the huddles. That was Micah Nori. That's the coach of the Timberwolves, assistant coach of the Timberwolves, who's been around for a while now, has bounced around the league as an assistant coach, and most recently, of course, spent time with the Timberwolves, and is often a guy who gives interviews on the sidelines where he is pretty honest in those interviews, saying exactly what's happening in the game. He talks about basketball in those interviews. He doesn't kind of hide it around analogies and stuff like that. is not a former NBA player, but has bounced around the league a long time as a coach and has a ton of experience as an assistant coach. Just want to put his name out there. I don't know if you have any opinions on Micah Nori other than he's not an NBA player. What do you think?
Not especially. I mean, I saw him a little bit in those sideline interviews you're talking about, but
they're pretty good. If you want to look up Micah Nori sideline interviews, and you can see that he definitely knows the game. Becky Hammon, I'm not sure she's interested in the NBA anymore, but I wanted to put her name out there because she was on this list. But if she is, I think that's someone you give an interview to.
She's still with the Aces, right? In the WNBA.
Yeah.
Okay,
coaching the best team in the WNBA that just gets all the best players and has like the largest budget to work with. So like that's probably pretty cushy and probably a nice job to have.
Yeah, but she does.
You work a lot less.
She does have to live in Las Vegas for that, which
does have to live in Las Vegas and probably gets paid a lot less than NBA coaches do. Like NBA coaches make a lot of money now, thanks to Monty Williams setting the new bar.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if Steve Nash is on this list.
The last two names I have, both former NBA players, both two good NBA players. In fact, Sam Cassell and Steve Nash.
Sure.
Yeah, Sam Cassell and Steve Nash. Steve Nash, the only, I think the only player here, the only player here besides Taylor Jenkins that has head coaching experience. Now, of course, in what I called the podcast to head coach pipeline of Mind the Game with LeBron James, being that, JJ Redick, who is, I think, doing a great job with the Los Angeles Lakers, is because that team is incredibly prepared as I watch them play, and he seems to have the respect of his players, which is, I think, the number one most important thing about doing the job.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, is what is helpful about being a former NBA player.
And oddly, I think throughout this entire season, not just post-Luka trade, but better than the sum of its parts in a way that, some people might think is insane to say. But, like, LeBron is really old.
The stats say that. Like, the net rating versus the record alone.
Right,
like,
well,
they're winning more games.
But, like, LeBron is really old. Of course, he's still good, but he's really old. And then Luka is... Luka is Luka. He's awesome. I had to resist the temptation to make a fat joke. But their supporting cast is just not that good. They have a lot of players on that team who have bounced around and are not that good, and JJ's making it work. And that's sort of what I'm talking about when I say, like, Taylor Jenkins, to go back to him, in Memphis, did the same thing. That's the mark of a good team. That's what the Suns have been unable to do the past 2 years.
Sam Cassell is like the classic style NBA coach that you think of, where they're like point guards that were never quite star point guards, but they were smart and they were in the NBA because they were smart. And then now has coached for 15 years. Did you know that? Sam Cassell has been an NBA coach for 15 years at this point.
Yeah.
Wizards, Clippers, Sixers, and I believe Celtics. And I think he's currently with the Clippers, if I'm not mistaken, on their staff. There is a survey that John Schumann does. It's the GM survey. You know about this GM survey. We occasionally talk about it on the podcast. Cassell was at the top of the list of best assistant coaches on that list. And, we all know who he is. He's been around the NBA a long time, and I think he's worked with a lot of interesting head coaches, including Ty Lue. And I think there's a chance that he could be a really good NBA coach in the future. And by the way, I think Steve Nash could be a really good NBA coach in the future. But also, if it doesn't work with Steve Nash, we're going to have to come on this podcast and talk about Steve Nash failing the Phoenix Suns. And that sounds kind of like a painful prospect for me.
Well, that's why I wouldn't. I think it's worthy of a shout to bring up Steve Nash. First of all, I'll just say I was shocked at the fact that Nash was interested in the Mind the Game podcast. I mean, I was shocked several years ago even that Nash was interested in that Brooklyn Nets job, because for such a long time I thought he's done with basketball. He's like, soccer is his thing. Evidently
he misses it.
He misses the basketball world, right? If it would not surprise me if him doing a season of Mind the Game is his way of auditioning for some sort of job that has even more prestige and pays more money as a coach again. I do not believe the Suns should be the ones to give him that job because of exactly what you're saying. How depressing would it be to tarnish his legacy in that way? It's the same reason. I mean, there are many reasons, but for years and years and years, whenever the who's the Suns GM, who should the Suns GM be, comes up, someone invariably says, "Oh, Charles Barkley," which Charles Barkley would be
the guy who doesn't know who players are and what teams they.
Charles Barkley would be probably the worst GM ever. But for years and years, you'd see articles, like Bleacher Report articles, being like, "Oh, Charles Barkley, he should be the next GM of the Suns." Not only would Chuck be a terrible GM, But also, that would just do nothing but tarnish his legacy as a Sun. It would be a terrible idea. And the same goes for Steve Nash as a coach. Sam Cassell is interesting. Again, obviously, former player. Just has the respect of everyone in the industry on the player side and on the coach side. Has one of the GOAT tier in-game celebrations from his time as a Timberwolf with the big balls.
Yeah,
if we were gonna,
which is now gets you automatically fined because of him. Yeah.
If we were gonna I would put it in his contract if we were gonna hire Sam Cassell that after big moments he needs to do the big ball celebration.
It's required.
It's required.
That HBO will pay.
HBO will eat the fine, but you have to do it. Based on the list, I think Taylor Jenkins, who of course is not an NBA player, but I think just did such a good job with the Grizzlies, and that's just such a bizarre story that we're waiting to hear more behind the scenes. He's on the top of my list, and then Chris Quinn and Sam Cassell as former players. That just sounds interesting to me. Guys who have been around the block for a while. Steve Nash, I'm sorry, I will intently listen to your podcasts with LeBron James, but I don't want you to coach my basketball team.
The first one being about how good Luka is and how much he destroyed the Suns will be fun, right? But I agree with you to some extent. But when I think about the context of this portion of the podcast was presented as what should the Suns' goal be next season? And I personally believe that it's essentially we're at a point in the Suns franchise that Devin Booker, regardless of how he's played this season, which I think is lower than the standards that he set for himself over the course of his career, has earned an opportunity to build another team around him and see how good that team could be. You can look at this situation, and someone on Reddit described it as one of the worst situations, if not the worst situation, any team has ever been in the history of the NBA. The Suns currently.
Yeah, I saw that.
Being that they have zero assets. And it's hard to argue that that's wrong.
I
personally do remember the Nets having two players that were in their late 30s. If Devin Booker was 36, it would feel a little bit more like that, but he's not. He's not even 30.
It felt dramatic to me. Because of Devin Booker, right? It's if they didn't have Book, or if Book was also 36 like KD is, then sure. But it's the fact that either you can keep trying to compete with Book for a few years, or you could hit the big reset button, and you just know that if you did trade Booker right now, you'd get young players and 5 first-round picks or whatever. And so at that point, you would no longer be in the worst situation in the NBA, right? Like, they're in a bad situation. They're in a bad spot, no doubt.
They're in a bad situation. They're in a bad spot.
But
these coaches would have to want to coach the Suns.
But there's
the other problem here.
Sure. But there's been worse. Been
worse.
I don't think,
but not many. This is one of the worst. I really think that's true.
I really don't think this is the part where I want to convince people, if they can be convinced, that this is not the time to abandon all hope. And just by if they can make the right trade. If they can make the right KD trade, and they can at all in any way get Beal off their roster in a way that doesn't involve a wave and stretch, that's maybe something we should talk about. The wave and stretch has been brought up, and it's gone through more rounds of...
I think we talked about it last week, yeah.
We did. We just said that they shouldn't do it, and then I think Gerald Bourguet came out and pointed out the rule that you can't have more than 15% of your salary in dead cap weight, so they can't wave and stretch Beal unless... Because Gambo talked about... They can't.
He agrees to a buyout.
Exactly. They can't. This is what we didn't cover on the pod, so I just want to make sure we cover it real quick. Can't waive and stretch Beal unless he agrees to a buyout to give back some of the money that he would make back by signing with another team, and so then it would be less money that you're waiving and stretching. I still wouldn't do it, but that's how you would do it. You would say, Beal, give back $20 million of your remaining $120 million or whatever. And then you're going to make that back by, signing a MLE contract somewhere or whatever, which he can probably live up to. I would hope.
Mm-hmm. I think he'd be pretty good on that contract. Yeah.
And
on the right team, of course.
And then instead of waiving and stretching $110 million, now you're just waiving and stretching $90 million, and now it's kosher. I think would still be a disaster for the Suns, but I guess theoretically they could do that. But yeah, how did we get here? Oh, Booker.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Booker is the reason that they are not in the worst spot ever.
It's true. I agree. I think they've made dumb move after dumb move after dumb move over time, and I think an example of that is I think trading the pick for 3 picks was probably a bad move. I think including a single first-round pick to get rid of Nurkic was a bad move, and they can't continue to do small stuff like that that's going to add up and hurt them over time. They have to make smart move after smart move after smart move going forward. And we'll see if that's something that they can do. I think Matt Ishbia and the way he talks about the future of the Suns is actually quite concerning. But, and we can have Matt Ishbia conversation later, but right now, if their goal for next season, and I understand that Devin Booker hasn't inspired a ton of confidence in a lot of people this season, but like this is a disaster season. We're talking about a disaster season. Sometimes that just happens. There's just really terrible seasons. He has earned enough respect, he has earned enough trust, and he has earned the love of the fans and the franchise that he deserves an opportunity to build a team around him next year and see how good they can be, with the understanding that that team might need another year or two to make more moves to get better over time, and he probably needs another star next to him, which maybe we'll talk about in our trade segment here. But having said that, the reason I bring that up is to say that the number one most important thing going into next season in a coach, if that's your goal for next season, is the synergy between Devin Booker and that coach. They have to be on the same page. They have to have established trust between the two of them that goes both ways, and Devin Booker has to be involved in that decision. Like that's just something that has to happen, because that's going to be the goal of next season. And I can tell you right now, this is probably the head coach in Devin Booker's career that he has the least synergy with. It seems as though he is not on the same page as this current head coach pretty regularly. And that means that he has to be involved in that decision. And if I had to guess in the players that we've listed, or the coaches that we've listed, the two that he would probably trust the most is probably Sam Cassell and Steve Nash. And that means that if those are the two guys that are going to be on the top of the list for him, they should probably be on the top of the list for the Suns. Going forward, if they end up, moving on from Devin Booker because he wants to leave and that's his choice, those coaches would probably be fine in that situation as well. Maybe Steve Nash wouldn't enjoy it, but they'd be okay in a long rebuild. You can extend them, you can make a decision later with them or whatever. And that's the case, but I do think that needs to be their priority next year, and I think that's going to make for an interesting conversation as we get into the offseason if Mike Budenholzer does end up getting fired.
So basically it seems...
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're just leaning towards what's going to happen. We're following all of the public information that we've heard, which is that Devin Booker for now is not on the table. Now, they might be listening to offers behind the scenes, but basically that they're going for more of a retool right now. There are going to be big changes coming in the summer, but it's going to be everyone except for Booker. And that just means it's a retool. It's not I mean, I guess you could call it a rebuild, but it's a soft rebuild. It's not a nuclear option. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, they don't have their picks, so...
Yeah.
They don't have their picks. They can't just do a complete explosion of the team because being bad does not benefit them in any way.
They could do a complete explosion. Just because you don't have your picks doesn't mean you can't do a complete explosion of the team.
Yeah, but what I mean, it's true in that Devin Booker would be the player that would get them back the most assets. It's true. And maybe even get their picks back. But in the situation where they don't have their own picks, being bad doesn't benefit them.
Sure.
So it's sort of the situation Brooklyn was in until they traded for their picks back as well.
Yeah.
And the situation Atlanta's in right now, ultimately, which is not good. It's not exactly the situation you want to be in.
This is a good segue.
Yeah, so let's that's all. And I want to think about it as we go forward, because maybe we can have more conversations that reframe this in a different light. What should the Suns' goal be for next season? Because next season in particular is going to be an interesting conversation. Let's talk about trades. For those who maybe haven't listened every week, we do a new trade at the end of every podcast every single week where we take turns coming up with either a trade or a trade partner.
Slop of the week.
We come up with a trade partner. Yeah, and then build multiple trades around that partner. I went last week. We've been alternating every week. So Sam, it is your turn.
I'm up.
I essentially know nothing.
Give me the bowling pin bat
present.
and let me swing away. I'm ready. Have you heard about the bowling pin Yankees controversy, or are you so far removed from baseball that you don't
I
care?
think that I saw a TikTok about it and I didn't understand
They're
it.
swinging bowling pins, Mike.
And it's working, right? And people are mad that it's working?
It's only two players in their lineup, but it's working. Yeah. And it's apparently legal. It's interesting. It's interesting.
It's the
That's
type
all I'll
of
say.
sports story that I actually kind of enjoy, regardless of the sports.
For sure.
I mentioned it. I mentioned it to you before.
Yeah. No,
But I listened to an entire 7-episode podcast about curling and the controversy around the brooms that were used that were too good for a very long time, and I found that to be quite fascinating. So this is something that I actually would enjoy.
they're going to make Moneyball Part 2 set in 2025 about the Yankees.
Money bat.
About the Yankees swinging bowling pins en route to the World Series. Anyway, we'll see how many other teams adopt that policy and what happens for them if they do that. A quick recap of just what we've done so far. I encourage you, to go back and listen to some of these other Trade of the Week segments if you haven't. But here's what we've done. We've mostly taken this approach, I think, of, let's be honest, mostly KD trades. There was one week where I tried my best to come up with Beal trades. I traded him to 3 places. Washington, I sent him back to Washington that week. Miami was a trade partner, if they have any interest in Beal for basically, when they don't have to send Jimmy Butler for him, but they got to send Terry Rozier and Duncan Robinson is what I think that package was, right? So if that would be any more attractive to them. And Orlando was another team I came up with. But generally the idea with Bradley Beal trades is get back maybe expiring salary, maybe just somewhat playable role players, but you're not really looking for too much in terms of loading the deck with like awesome young pieces, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why you have to trade KD. If you want to keep Devin Booker, then the only piece you really have to load the deck is KD. And so we've traded KD to Dallas, we've traded him to San Antonio, we've traded him to Houston, and we've traded him to Minnesota. Today we're going to trade him to a 5th team. And the approach this time is just a little bit different in that I think our approach with other ones has been mostly let's get back some combination of role players, maybe in their prime role players, but role players. And
depth.
Rookie contracts.
Yeah.
And first-round picks. I think we're looking for like the ideal KD package so far for us, whether it's been centered around, Stephon Castle or Tari Eason and Jalen Green,
Jabari Smith Jr.
Jabari Smith Jr. or whoever we said for the Timberwolves, McDaniels and Naz Reid. Right? It's been depth. It's been guys who are, let's be honest, not either they're rookie
role players
or they're rookie contracts who maybe they will be stars. Maybe Stephon Castle is going to be awesome, but he'll be awesome 3 years from now, not next year. Today, I want to take a different approach and say, okay, what if we just... Is it possible to swap KD for another all-star caliber player? Maybe a lesser all-star caliber player, but an all-star caliber player in a way that is going to fit Devin Booker, that allows you to build a system around that player and Devin Booker, and just generally in a way that gives you a fit that makes you feel better about next year to continue competing. Not everything's going to be solved with this one trade, but it gives you an identity to start from, right?
Okay.
What if we could do that?
Can I just say, too, because you and I talked about this, and by the way, the analogy of the bowling ball pin bats is good, because I'm calling these home run trades. These are they're trying to hit a home run, and I want to say that I think that this is the most likely approach that Matt Ishbia will have for a Kevin Durant trade. He's not going to say, give me 4 players, 2 of them that are on rookie deals that aren't very good. He apparently hates young players. Like he doesn't want draft picks and doesn't like young players.
Frankly, you could say...
And the only trade that we know about that the Suns were close to making was Kevin Durant for Jimmy Butler.
Yeah. In a way, you could say...
They wanted to do that.
In a way, you could say Ishbia is, and I wouldn't blame you if you said this, allergic to doing the mature thing. to saying uncle, throwing up his hands and saying, okay, just give me all the picks, give me whatever.
He's in a rush.
Yeah, he's in a rush. So if he can
it's as if he's gonna die in 2 years, and he's trying to win a championship.
Yeah, even though he's like 40 years old, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically my approach here, and I promise I'll get to the trade now. KD is awesome, but he's 36, soon to be 37. Can you get an all-star who is in their prime right now next to Devin Booker? Maybe they won't be as good as Kevin Durant, and that's part of why the trade will work, but they'll be 10 years younger, and maybe that works. And maybe you have those guys play together for a couple years, and then if you have to reevaluate, You go from there. But here's the trade. The other key, so 2 other keys. This is a 3-team trade because I needed to send KD to a place where I think he actually would want to go and to a place that would want him, and then get a star from a 3rd team because the team that's trading for KD is not going to trade a star for him. And I also needed that star that the Suns are getting to be in their own position where their future feels uncertain, the future of their organization feels uncertain. And with that being said, all that being said, here's the trade. The New York Knicks receive Kevin Durant. Welcome team number 5 to the table. New York, he's going back. He's ready to antagonize all of the Brooklyn Nets fans, all 5,000 of them, because he's going back to New York. And the Knicks get what they've always wanted. A prime, well, maybe not in his prime, but a tier A superstar name for the Big Apple to put next to Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns.
Oh, so they're not trading Towns. Okay.
They're not trading Towns. That is not the star. The Sacramento Kings, team number 2, receive OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, and Tyler Kolek. And the Phoenix Suns receive Domantas Sabonis, Deuce McBride.
Interesting.
1st-round pick swaps with the New York Knicks in 2028 and 2030, and a couple 2nd-round picks. And the reason I had to do that, the reason I had to be so specific about the pick swaps, you'll remember the New York Knicks traded 5 1st-round picks for Mikal Bridges. Because they did that, and that was, I mean, look, they're a playoff team. They're a good team now. But because they traded 5 1st-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and because the Stepien rule exists, they cannot trade more 1st-round picks. The best that they can do is trade pick swaps. And so we can get some pick swaps, and a few years down the line, maybe the Knicks won't be so good, and you can improve your pick position. But I understand it has much less value than just getting an additional pick. It's not the same as getting an additional pick. That's why I thought maybe they'll toss in a couple 2nd-round picks. But the main idea behind this trade is you get Domantas Sabonis, who is a 28-year-old, 3-time All-Star in a situation in Sacramento where rumors are circling that he might even approach their front office and ask basically for a new situation because he is not confident in the future, the direction that they're taking. Of course, they traded De'Aaron Fox at the deadline. They brought in Zach LaVine. That has not remotely worked. They continue to slide in the standings. They're in basically the same place in the standings as we are. And meanwhile, Sabonis is the best rebounder in the NBA. He's led the NBA in rebounds per game 3 years in a row. He is a Jokic light-esque player who you can run your offense through. 1,000% the type of center that Devin Booker likes to play with. Like, if you think Devin Booker looks good next to Oso Ighodaro because he can't be trapped, because he can trust Oso to make decisions in the short roll, like Sabonis is, except with the exception of Jokic, Sabonis is the best center in the NBA at doing all of that. And so I think would be a perfect fit with Booker in terms of like, how do you build an offense around a pick and roll attack where Booker's the main guy making plays, making decisions, but then Sabonis is the secondary decision maker. And Booker is also a guy where you can start plays with Sabonis on the elbow or delay sets at the top of the key and work Booker off ball, collecting handoffs from Sabonis. Or you can push the pace, having Sabonis be the guy. It is such an asset, as the Nuggets have shown us over the past several years, to have a center who is just amazing at swallowing up defensive rebounds and then takes the ball up themselves without having to worry about, wasting 8 or 9 seconds getting it to a guard and getting into their offense, right? They can just initiate the offense themselves, and Sabonis can do all that. Now, concerns about Sabonis? Yeah. He's not a rim protector. There are always going to be questions
about... It's not very big in general, yeah.
Yeah, what is your ceiling starting a center for 36 to 38 minutes a game who is not a rim protector? That's always going to be the question about a guy like Sabonis. And truthfully, we don't know because he's never been on a great team. He's only been on kind of good teams. But if the Suns are going to pivot from being a bad team, which is what they are right now, I think you could make the case that the Sabonis-Booker fit allows them to go from being an actively bad team to a kind of good team. Of course, they need to make other solid moves around. Deuce McBride, by the way, I was able to poach Deuce McBride in this trade. He's a 24-year-old, awesome backup point guard, signed under a cheap contract for a couple more years of team control. I think that would be good, too.
I think that would be good, too. You get a player that has some level of potential, that could be better in the future with the Suns need. More guys who could do that.
What's in it for the Knicks is, of course, here is the Knicks starting five after this trade. It is Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Kevin Durant, and Karl Anthony Towns. And I would say if the Knicks cannot win a championship with that starting five, they fucking tried, right? That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, you can say we did what you could, yeah. And I think, Karl Anthony Towns is the weak link defensively there that could cause problems.
He absolutely is, but putting him next to a weak side rim protector like Kevin Durant, if
helpful.
KD is locked in, is going to make him look a lot better. Whereas right now, OG is great, but OG and Bridges both, they're long guys, but they're not particularly strong. I guess you could say the same thing about KD, but it gives you a little bit more height, a little more size at the power forward position. And what's in it for the Kings? This is the big one.
Yeah.
I don't know what the Kings want, because I really do think Sabonis...
It's not a bad trade for them, actually, I think.
I don't think so either, but here's what I was trying to do. So the Kings are... Sabonis is going to be in trade conversations this summer. He just is. Now, again...
And by the way, that has been reported. This is not coming out of nowhere from Sam. That's already been reported, yeah.
If the Kings are smart, they would blow it up. But they're not going to do that because they're in the same situation that Matt Ishbia is in, where they're going to want to try and continue to talk themselves into competing somehow. So if it's just a broken relationship, then the best that they can do is not, trade Sabonis for a couple rookie contracts and a bunch of first-round picks, but it's to do something more like what I gave them here. They're trading Sabonis, who is an all-star light. He's not one of the top all-stars in the NBA. He's a reserve all-star. And they're getting back a high-level starter in OG Anunoby, a low-level starter in Mitchell Robinson, and a depth piece / rookie contract in Tyler Kolek. I'm not sure they can do much better than that if their goal is to trade Sabonis for pieces that can keep them repetitive or competitive right now.
Let me ask you this. Would the Suns be better if they just took those guys?
I think no.
Like OG Anunoby, Tyler Kolek, Mitchell Robinson.
No, because if they just took those guys...
Because they get depth, they get a starting center, they get depth, they get a wing that could defend, they get a future point guard in Tyler Kolek.
I would say emphatically...
Who I love, by the way.
Say emphatically no, because here's, in conjunction with this, you're trying to move off Beal. You'll see if maybe you can move off Beal. And if you go in, OG Anunoby's a good player. Mitchell Robinson, he's a good rim runner and rim protector. If you just go in next season with that lineup around Devin Booker... The scouting report is double Booker
Trap Devin Booker.
Devin Booker every time. If you don't give Booker a second player who is either like a natural point guard that he can play off of.
Which I think you still need if you have Sabonis, but we can find ways to do that later.
Yeah. Look, you still have Beal to trade. You still have maybe Grayson to trade. You still have maybe Royce to trade. There are other moves that could be made in conjunction with this.
If you're under the second apron too, if you're under the second apron, you could start combining some of those players too.
Yeah, I think giving Sabonis, who is a true point center in the way that there are only 3 or 4 of those guys in the NBA, that is a guy who Booker could play off of. There are going to be defensive concerns, and that is the next thing that you have to address if you make this trade. But no doubt in my mind, you can build a good offense around those two guys that's going to keep you competitive even against good teams night in and night out.
I think that there is really no situation where the Suns get out of this situation that they have currently. And the team is not flawed in some ways. And what I mean by that is like you get Sabonis and you're going to have defensive concerns, I agree. And maybe even some offensive concerns because they're not going to be perfect around them unless they have other players. But I think for the Suns, if you get one step in the right direction closer, and then you have the ability of getting a year down the road and seeing where you're at, and seeing the type of players, understanding the type of players that can fit around that, and then trying to make that better going forward, that's a good place to be. Like, you're in a pretty good place in that case. And I think for Suns fans, there is some resetting, like re-leveling expectations on what the future is going to look like. And that is actually going to be difficult for a lot of fans because so much of the last few years has been championship. And this next season is probably not going to be that. And there's really not a lot of cases where they can put that together. But one step in the right direction, getting a better team around Devin Booker and figuring out what you can do going forward after that is an interesting case. And I think you did a good job with this trade because I actually think it makes sense for the Kings. I think it makes sense in some ways for the Suns. And I think it makes sense, especially if the Knicks lose early. Like if they get bounced in the first round for some reason, I think they could be looking for a trade exactly like this in order to better their future. And in this case, by the way, they're not even giving up that much, like as far as their future, because they don't have much to give up.
Yeah, I mean, they're giving up pick swaps because that's all they have, and then OG Anunoby, who would have to go out in any trade for salary matching purposes regardless.
And has been good.
He has been good. He's a good player, but it's like you have to trade salary to get salary. And so you're giving up OG, Deuce McBride, Mitch, who they don't even like that much anymore, and Kolek. For KD, I don't think that's that much, honestly. And
I wouldn't mind trying to get Kolek in that trade, by the way. Just
Kolek,
Iguodala,
I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind
fun.
getting Kolek too. We already got Deuce McBride, and I felt like I had to give something else to the Kings, like to maybe a future piece to give them the impression that they're getting something right now and also in the future. So that's why I did that. But yeah, no, I totally feel you. With the Knicks too, it's just like they're not a good team against other good teams. That's been their hiccup the entire season. They are a good team, but compared to the Celtics, compared to the Cavs, they have a bad record against 500-plus teams. And so they might just need another real superstar in order to get there.
Fascinating. Good work. I love the idea of Sabonis and Devin Booker. I think it could actually be really good. I don't know how good they would be next year.
What do you, if you had your way, like, toss out Ishbia's thinking aside and whatever, between trading KD for, say, Stephon Castle or some similar prospect who could be really good and some first round picks and maybe a role player, or getting an in their prime all-star like Sabonis in a package like this.
Yeah. So I think that what we heard about the Suns potentially figuring out a trade where they were going to get Jimmy Butler for Kevin Durant plus picks from the Warriors is like the best possible case, and I understand why they were so close to doing that. Because in that scenario, they were going to have an all-star player joining the Suns that they could extend, and potentially adding picks to allow them to have flexibility in the future. And obviously that's like the best case. But if they can find a version of a trade where they could potentially find someone who's desperate to leave their team and get them relatively low in their overall value and capitalize on a team that needs Kevin Durant to be successful in the way that they were going to do with the Warriors, that's the best case, because then they add some flexibility for the future. I like the idea of saying we found two players that fit together in Devin Booker and so-and-so. And now we understand how they fit together, and over time we can build the better team around them to be competitive over time. But I am nervous about the concept of having very little flexibility going forward, because this team, as it currently stands, the lack of flexibility that they had was really damaging to them. And that's a little bit scary. So having draft picks that they're able to trade and being out of the second apron, which I think in particular was really paralyzing for this team, being in that second apron, should be an important goal for them as well. I guess my feelings are a little bit mixed. I think it depends on the player. I like Sabonis. I think he's pretty good, and I think he could be good with Devin Booker. And I honestly think that, judging Sabonis by how bad the Kings have been or how mediocre the Kings have been for years is probably not the right approach to it, because the Kings are kind of a mess.
Yeah, I think the ceiling questions about Sabonis are totally valid, but just is he a good player? Yeah, he's obviously a good player. Here's a stat about Sabonis.
Can he be a top 10 center? Yeah.
The Kings are 9.6 points per 100 better with him on the floor this year.
That's actually pretty crazy.
And not only are they that, I mean, look, you expect to be better when your star players are on the floor, but I think
but that's better than any Suns player as far as the difference they make on the floor,
I think the most important thing here actually is that so they're basically 10 points better with Sabonis on the floor. Only 5 points of those are offense. The other 5 points, they're actually 5 points better on defense with Sabonis on the floor this year. And so I think, that speaks to the idea of, hey, there's more to this guy maybe than meets the eye a little bit or meets the narrative, if you will, right? you can insulate him properly if you have the right defensive pieces around him, and he's going to make your offense really good. You just know that.
I do think the whole idea of, well, who guards Jokic is really only a problem if you're a contender, which if that's going to be the problem next year, that's a pretty good situation for the Suns if that's what we're going to be worried about. Because like right now it's like, how can they beat the Charlotte Hornets is the questions we're asking.
Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true.
So if that's going to be the questions we're asking next year, then that's a step in the right
direction. And also it's like, just gives you a pivot point where Sabonis, again, he's 28. It's not like KD. He's not going anywhere. If you give it a shot for 1 or 2 years and it doesn't work, well, okay, you can move on. It's just like, feels like a more reasonable pivot to me than Jimmy Butler did, for instance. And look, I still understand what you're saying about the Jimmy Butler trade. Like, that has worked out great for Golden State so far. Maybe it would have for the Suns too.
I think it would have.
But I would feel so much more comfortable with Ishbia approaching the strategy of, we want to keep competing, if he's trading for 28-year-old All-Stars and not 35-year-old All-Stars.
Yeah. Great job. I think you did a great job on that one. Real quick before we go, I want to give a shout out to the Podfather Bill Simmons for bringing Zach Lowe back. I've just been excited about this all day, trying to figure out when that first Zach Lowe podcast is going to post. For those who don't realize, Zach Lowe is joining The Ringer, rejoining his friend Bill Simmons, is going to have his podcast likely going to be writing on their website. And I'm looking forward to him burying the Suns on a podcast in the future, because I feel like that will be cathartic, and often his what he notices and what he sees is right. So I look forward to someone actually being accurate in their analysis.
Exactly. Yeah. His voice of reason has been missing from the landscape this year, the overall national landscape this year. You felt it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to him being back. Anything else that you got before we go?
Man, I don't think so. What's our next game?
No playback this week. The next game is in Milwaukee, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
In Milwaukee tomorrow, and then don't have to play until Friday at Boston.
And they're going to be on the road for both of those games. Difficult games. Obviously Milwaukee missing a guy.
That Milwaukee game tomorrow is on TNT. Just put us out of our misery already.
We need a Devin Booker. We need a good Devin Booker game. But there is no question about how to guard Devin Booker now without KD. They're just going to blitz him every single possession. That's why you got to start Oso Ighodaro. Just put him in there. Let him try. It's not going to go well. Like Nick Richards wasn't guarding Giannis very well anyway. Just let Oso in there to try to get the offense.
In Alec Peters' April, I could totally see us getting like an Oso game, 22 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists or something if they just blitz Book every possession. And that would almost be the tryout tape that you need to talk you into the Sabonis fit.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I will be out of town this week, so I'm going to try to watch the games as live as I can. Some of them I'll be catching up on later, but we will still have a Patreon episode this week. So for the patrons, you'll get one if you want to join. Patreon.com/thetimeline. But we appreciate you all. We'll be back very soon.